and we're all very excited by the legacy opportunities that that sport in that city will provide us, and some of the creative marketing thinking that they've already put into how to grow the sport. We did it under a slightly different system. We created a bid evaluation panel that was chaired by Hamad Kalkabar, my vice president from Africa, but with a different approach and a much more, in a way, a more statistical, analytical process that we went through, but nonetheless we're very pleased to welcome them. We also agreed on the timetabling and the work that has already been undertaken for national sponsorship to appear on the national vests at World Championships. And we're on schedule to be able to introduce that for the 2019 World Championships in Doha. Rationale behind it, important that we do everything we possibly can to create new and fresh income streams for our member federations, and by implication, of course, fresh and new income streams, I hope, for our athletes. Our athletes simply must be given greater financial skin in the game, which is what sits behind much of our thinking around the revitalization of Diamond League. The chairmanship of that working group actually taking place at this moment, of course, John Ridgen. I was also delighted last night to join the Athletes Forum. Every opportunity that I get to speak to athletes I take, whether it's at our area championships, the member federation opportunities that I'm afforded in my extensive travel is absolutely essential. We learn from them, they can learn from us, and last night was no different. And I'm delighted that the athletes endorsed very, very strongly the position that the Council have maintained this morning on the reintroduction or otherwise of RUSAF. And that probably allows me to segue perfectly into Rune Andersen, the chair of that task force. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seb. So I'll report from the task force's decision today and yesterday, which resulted in that the Council today accepted the task force's recommendations not to reinstate RUSAF until the following two conditions have been met in full. The Athletics Integrity Unit must confirm that it has been given all of the data and access to the samples that it needs to determine which of the Russian athletes in the LIMS database have a case to answer for breach of the IAAF anti-doping rules. The IAAF Council was clear that Russian athletes cannot return to international competition unconditionally until that such issue is resolved one way or the other. Secondly, RUSAF must pay all of the costs incurred in the work of the task force and in bringing or defending Russian cases at CAS. The IAAF Council was clear that this debt must be settled for reinstatement to occur. It is not fair to ask the IAAF and its other members to continue to carry these costs. The task force hopes that RUSAF and the Russian authorities will now take all steps necessary to meet these conditions as soon as possible. The task force stands ready to meet as soon as these conditions have been met in order to make a recommendation to Council for the reinstatement of RUSAF.
Great, thank you. Rune, did you want to add anything, Sarah, or I might open it to questions?
No, I'm, of course, very happy and would like to place on record my thanks to Rune because there is much work that goes into the recommendation that is given to the task force. I can see at least 2 or 3 members of the task force sitting in the body of the Kirk, and I'd just like to thank them for what is an onerous task and has been for the last 3 years.
Okay, so normal rules apply. Could you just tell us your name and where you're from? We'll start with
Michael Reinsch, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung from Germany. Sorry, Seb, this is to Rune.
Don't be sorry, it's fine.
The second condition you mentioned, isn't that already being solved by the Russian president applying to pay back the debt of, as he mentioned, like 2.7 million euros? If you could confirm that, please, within half a year. So is it actually only one condition, the access to the data and the samples in Moscow?
There are two conditions, and this one applies because we have got assurances that the Russians will pay. We need to receive the money before that condition is met. So that is the issue that we put forward to the council today, and they agreed on.
Also, just to be clear, that was an invoice up until the end of June this year. So, yeah. So there will be additional invoices, particularly if we go to CAS. Oh, sorry.
Jean Cherry from Reuters.
Jean, could you? Thank you.
Yes. Have you received any assurance from the Russians that the data will be made available?
We have received no assurances that it will be delivered to us directly. As you will know, the assurances has been given to WADA, and WADA has set a deadline, 31st of December, to receive the data from the Russians. And we will have to rely on receiving the data from WADA and then give it to the Athletics Integrity Unit to examine the data before we are satisfied that the data is correct data and hasn't been tampered with.
Okay, question here.
Artem Kuznetsov, Task News Agency. As you know, WADA could consider as a full restatement of Russia in the middle of January. So when the IAAF Council could consider this case next time, right after that or just in March?
Well, our next council meeting is in March, but the task force is in what I would describe as permanent monitoring and reactive mode. So we will see how events unfold.
Duncan?
Duncan McCain, so the Games. Seb, is the ban being lifted conditional on all the samples being analysed first, which could be the end of June? And that would put in danger Russia's participation in Doha. Do you see that potentially happening?
They do participate.
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, it's always worth remembering, and I do have to remind people that actually Russian athletes do compete. They compete under neutral status, and it was from the very beginning of this process. It's one of the first things we actually discussed, which is, where possible, do everything you can to separate the clean athletes from the tainted system. So, yeah, look, in a way, of course, we now have another structure which can be and will be very helpful in this process because, of course, we have the AIU. And the AIU will want to know on behalf of the IAAF and in conjunction with the task force that any data, any samples that are received are in a form that allows us to properly understand, what they're showing. In simple terms, the analysis that we make through the AIU will be very important, and the review that the AIU gives us equally important. Rune, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that, but it's part now. I guess there's a third body in there.
We're not dependent upon the 30th of June deadline. As soon as the AIU has analyzed the data, they might ask for samples to be released so that it can be analyzed at a lab, of course, outside of Russia. That can happen anytime. Whether the Russians can or will release the samples, it's up to them. We cannot demand anything. We just know that WADA has the deadline of 30th of June, but we can analyze those data at any time as the ARU see fit.
Hi, Nick.
Nick Butler, ARD. Rune, you said you've had no assurances from the Russians, but you've met with them, you've dealt with the investigative committee. In your heart, do you think that they will provide full and accurate data?
I think that's very difficult to answer that question. I will hope that they will deliver the data by the end of this year, by the end of this month, and that we and the ARU will be able to analyze them, and I cannot go any further than that. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, Mike.
Mike Robotham here for the IAAF today, but really, what is the actual problem in handing over the samples? What is it that is so difficult that they can't do it, do they say? What is the problem with handing it over? When you ask the Russian authorities, when would you be able to hand these samples over, what is the answer that you get back? What are the difficulties that they say are in the way?
Well, we actually dealt with this a long time ago, long before WADA did. In 2016, we raised this question with the investigative committee. We actually had the chief of the investigative committee at one of our meetings with a full task force, and we asked specifically on why the data and why the samples couldn't be released. And the answer was this was a crime scene. It was under investigation, and we couldn't get access to the lab as such. Now, almost 3 years later, it seems that there will be access to the lab, but what has happened in the meantime, of course, we have no idea on what has happened.
Okay, any other questions? Because we've got a full afternoon of... yes, Duncan. Oh, yes, and Elias.
Can I ask a non-Russian question, Seb?
If you must.
The process for choosing Budapest for 2023 was your new model.
Yeah.
Do you consider that to be a success? Will you adopt it for 2025? Is it still your plan to go to Africa, and have you identified a city or country there?
I think we will adopt this as the template going forward, and they're clearly, this is the first time we've used it in the way that we've used it. So the bid evaluation panel was made up of council colleagues, but I asked, for instance, Cherry Alexander, who was responsible for a hugely successful delivery of another championships, and Antti Pilakovsky, who delivered World Championships in Finland. So we've relied heavily on the experience and expertise of people that have actually delivered championships on the ground. The simple concept behind the change of emphasis is that I've just long since felt that the way we've gone about choosing our cities or the runners and riders in the past has been a little ad hoc and probably suboptimal. And what is it that we're trying to do as an international sport? We're trying to do what every other international sport is trying to do, and that is choosing opportunities and venues that will allow us to grow and expand the sport into new markets, new income streams, new sponsors, more young people, more creative ways of engaging with those young people. And for us to go through anything other than that process, I think, is actually not a great system to be in. We only have two really big global moments in our own sport. I'm talking about the World Championships every 2 years. There's the Olympic Games, but we have little or no choice over where they go. So we have to absolutely maximize every bit of potential in our sport through those venues on that basis. And I wanted this to be a much more quantifiable process, and I think it has. There will be things that we'll learn from this going forward. Africa, I've made very clear, and actually our council discussed it briefly yesterday morning, about some of the processes around the bidding concepts and some of those things. Yeah, you know, we are a global sport. It is really important that at some stage we allow a sport in a, you know, hugely important continent to us to be able to do that. In fact, of course, we have done that to a certain extent in the last few years, because we've had the under-18 championships in Nairobi. We've already had we've had a World Cross Country Championships in Uganda. We've agreed that Nairobi will be the host to the 2020 under-20 championships. So this, for us, is an important, you know, transitional pathway.
So 3 more questions. Elias, oh no, you're done. Okay, Hayo, down here.
One question to clarify. Jackie, you talked about the amount of money which has to be paid still. To clarify, you talked also about some other invoices which might come. Can you estimate what will be the total approximately, and what is the content, what is the reason for the further invoices?
Yeah, I can't estimate what will come, but the invoice that we've given to date goes to the end of June. There clearly have been task force meetings, so every time we spend money, either defending in CAS or the task force spends money going on visits, that will be invoiced. That was part of the agreement at the beginning. So I don't know, and as you know, there is a CAS outstanding. RUSAF are taking us to CAS, so that will be quite, I would imagine, sizable.
Looks more than 3 million.
Can't say, but it depends how long the process is going to go on for.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Gentleman there, and thank you. Any last question? Hands up. Okay.
Je peux poser ma question en français. C'est Mohamed Bouchrif du Maroc. Je suis freelance. Bon. Dernièrement, plusieurs fédérations sportives internationales se sont tournées vers l'Afrique. Même le CIO a accordé les Jeux olympiques de la jeunesse à Dakar. Et on sait que lors du 27e congrès de la Confédération africaine d'athlétisme tenu l'année dernière à Rabat, vous avez déclaré que vous militez pendant votre mandat pour l'organisation d'un championnat du monde en plein air en Afrique. Quand est-ce que c'est de 2025? Est-ce que vous allez, par exemple, faire comme l'a fait, par exemple, la FIFA, candidature uniquement africaine, sans concurrence européenne ou asiatique? Quelle procédure vous allez suivre pour attribuer l'organisation de ce championnat à un pays africain? Merci.
Yeah, thank you. The basic premise is, and I've been very clear about it, you know, if we're a global sport, we need to stage our events in global locations. And clearly, the need to be able to do that is important. Of course, you have to think about a whole range of issues relating to some of the stuff that I've already talked about, but also athlete welfare and everything else. So the answer, I don't think, alters very much from the one I gave Duncan, which is that, yes, we want to be able to look at that. Of course, it's not a matter just for me. I have a council which will clearly take a view on that. And in the same way that we want to identify particular cities and particular marketplaces that can help us build the sport, we need also to extend that into the thinking about our continental, or as we call them, our area associations as well.
So very last question, Franco, because then we've got to go back. Thank you. Franco Fava.
Franco Fava, Corriere dello Sport, President Sepp. It seems that no decision has been taken today regarding the venue for the 21 cross-country championships. And if you can tell us a little more about this. And also regarding cross-country, as the 2024 Paris Olympic Games will mark the centenary After the last cross-country took part at the Olympic Games with a gold medal by Paavo Nurmi, could you tell us a little more if there is any project to bring back cross-country and Olympic program, maybe in Paris? Thank you.
I think probably the Olympic Summit, when I attend, as I regularly do, and will be there this Saturday, probably already know what I will say about cross-country coming back into the Olympic program. I've always believed it should. And I know there would be a discussion about summer or even winter, but I think it's important. I've always been a great believer in cross-country. I think it is the basis of everything good in middle distance and endurance. And in fact, if you look at the diminution in performances in Europe over particularly long distance, our endurance events, I don't think there's any coincidence that that almost entirely overlaps with the less priority that younger coaches give to cross country. So that's now got that off my chest. I think that we have witnessed in the last few weeks, actually, the role that cross country can play in its presence in the Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires, which I'm told, I wasn't there for that occasion, but I'm told it was one of the more successful events, and my discussions already with Lausanne going forward have been, you know, very, very positive in that area. So yes, I think cross-country, it's a personal view. I'm not sure maybe everybody would share that view in the council. I'll continue to work on it, but I think cross-country is an essential part of our programme.
And this morning? The bid?
The bid this morning. No, I think I think it's a simple case of we are asking the Australian organising committee, the bid committee, and the potential organising committee and the federation to come back with some more detailed analysis. You know, and that's really around operational integration, some of the key questions that our council colleagues have asked for. So that will probably return to us in a more completed format for the March council meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for coming, and sorry to keep you waiting again. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, yeah, you've got to quickly do a line and run down the line.
Oh, there?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So this is the only chance.